It's Sunday, August 17, 2025. I'm Anthony Davis. Welcome to the Weekend Show, where we make the time to consider the news of the week. You can support my work and independent journalism at patreon.com/5minute news. Our guest today returns by popular demand to continue our conversation from last week. He is, of course, the Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist and author, David Cay Johnston. Welcome back to the Weekend Show.
Good to be with you again, Anthony.
David, we wrapped up our conversation last week discussing the stealth-like desire of the Trump regime to eradicate the poor, not just by not by enabling their social mobility, but literally by killing them off through lack of medicine or public services. And Trump's record on mass death extends from the near million Americans that needlessly died during COVID due to his incompetence, but also to his Yemen bombings, which have killed nearly as many civilians in as 23 previous years of US attacks. And there are other instances too. How important do you think it is to highlight the true danger of Donald Trump, not just on America, but on the world?
Oh, it is absolutely essential to constantly truth squad Donald. This week, he claimed before he went to Alaska that he had ended 6 wars since he took office. Really? I mean, he just makes this stuff up. And he has no understanding or appreciation of the fundamental things that he's doing. So if you told him the bombing of the Houthis, which cost apparently about $500 million in armaments and bomber flights, had no significant effect on the Houthi rebels, but absolutely killed all sorts of children, widows, orphans, etc., he would either walk away, tell you it was a nasty question, but he wouldn't address that simple fact.
What do you make of these kind of fake peace agreements that he's been doing of late? I mean, of course, there was the Abraham Accords during his last presidency, where he took several nations that weren't really in conflict and put on a press conference outside the White House where everybody signed a thing to say they were going to continue being nice to each other. I mean, this performative aspect, and we're going to come on to the meeting in Alaska for over Ukraine shortly, but I mean, this performative trying to win a Nobel Peace Prize by just inviting people to the table to sign pieces of paper, that is a theme with him. I mean, it even extends to tariffs, doesn't it? When he stood with Keir Starmer and dropped the paperwork that was completely blank. I mean, you don't get more explicit than that.
Yeah, this is all Potemkin politics. And of course, the story of the Potemkin village is itself a Potemkin story because it's not true. But Donald he creates his own reality. He makes these claims. As a child, most of us, at least in America, were taught, don't count your chickens before they hatch. Don't spend your paycheck before you get it. Donald didn't get that message. So if he meets with you, he will claim that, you said, oh, thank you, Mr. President, for telling us that our country is all messed up and we need to bow to you. We're so grateful that you did that for us. And unfortunately, the people who he purports to love, the poorly educated, just eat that up because they don't know any better and they don't want to know any better. So in all of the things we're seeing Trump does, he said he was going to settle the Ukraine war in one day. In fact, at one point, he said he didn't even need to take office. He just needed to win the election. Well, as we saw from Friday in Alaska, didn't exactly work out that way.
But it's kind of bribery in a way, isn't it? And emotional blackmail. And him winning the election, obviously there's now, with hindsight, a lot of people are realizing that, that the fraudulent activities that we're seeing now regarding redistricting and all sorts of issues with the vote, that Donald Trump is completely untrustworthy when it comes to elections. But lying about your plans for, your manifesto to what will ultimately turn out to be what you present as president. I mean, how do we kind of hold him to that stuff? Because to him, he can just say anything. He's realized that because people don't hold his feet to the fire, that the truth is irrelevant.
Right. And the truth to Donald has always been what he creates, what he wishes it to be. And if you don't agree, well, fake news or you're a nasty person. We're not going to change Donald about that. What's important is to not ever accept his nonsense as if it was true. He is trying very hard now to just destroy history he doesn't like. He's ordered that all of the Smithsonian institutions, the federal government museums, primarily right in the mall in Washington, D.C., are going to have to change their exhibits to fit his understanding or his minions' understanding of history. They've been purging the accomplishments of women and minorities from all sorts of government websites. One of the contracts, government research contracts, and it's government that finances basic science, and it's those basic science insights which are responsible for more than half the growth of the American economy in the last 80 years since the end of World War II. They canceled one that deals with tectonic plate movements, that is geography deep beneath the surface, geology deep beneath the surface of the land, because it had the word intersectional in it, which they take to mean something about sex. The incompetence of these people is beyond belief. And the results of what he's doing are what we need to focus on. And I'll give you a great example. Trump said, inflation will stop, I will lower prices. That, of course, would be a deflation, which can be worse than inflation. Well, we just got on Friday the new numbers from the producer price index, or on Thursday. Vegetables in July were up 39% in round numbers, almost 40%. Absolutely unheard of. There's never been a change like that. We've never hit double digits before. Why would they be up? Because the people who would pick the crops either are staying home out of fear or ICE has arrested them and they're out of the country. And there's plenty of video out there of farmers saying, hey, wait a minute, I voted for this guy, but my crops are rotting in the field. What did you think he was going to do? If you're a successful farmer, you have to be a pretty sophisticated person these days. Well, it's one thing to be economically and agriculturally sophisticated, but apparently doesn't transfer over into politics. We're seeing that the tariffs, which companies figuring they would get the money back or they wouldn't happen, were absorbed temporarily. Nope, now they're going into the prices. We're seeing job growth has, for all practical purposes, suddenly stopped and may go into reverse. Although Trump has just appointed someone from the Heritage Foundation to run the Bureau of Labor Statistics, who does not have a very good reputation, and I suspect it's about to get worse because on Friday, I and other people posted a verified picture of him in his office, and behind him is a huge photograph of the Nazi battleship, the Bismarck. So these are not people who love America or care about America. They're the kind of people someone like Donald can attract. They're losers, they're third-raters, they're believers in the things he believes in, white supremacy, misogyny, make America white again.
There are two themes here. One, I think, is this kind of neo-Nazi connection and white supremacists, as you describe. But the other thing, with all of his appointees, is a complete lack of expertise. And what is the result of removing all expertise from government, from every cabinet member, from the military through education? Where, we've been seeing a lot of these committee hearings recently, and every single one of these individuals cannot answer a solitary question, basic questions. Right. About their own department or about plans for the future. Well, what's that going to do to the country?
If you're the education secretary, Mrs. McMahon, you don't know the difference between artificial intelligence, AI, and steak sauce, A1. No, the whole point is appointing people who are incompetent because you're trying to show the government can't do anything. Now, my wife and I just took a week and went to the Chautauqua Institution in Western New York, and we spent the whole week studying authoritarianism because we don't get enough punishment in life from the circumstances around us. And one of the courses that I took was from a retired Xerox international executive, global executive, who studied 7 fascist governments, Mussolini, Spain, Portugal, Germany, and 3 others. And one of the findings he had is that they all immediately, when a fascist takes office, appoint family and incompetent people who will just be loyal to them and do what they say, that they immediately are out trying to make money off of their official office. And Trump has gone from not being a billionaire to, I'm sure, a multi-billionaire in just a matter of months. They make corrupt deals left and right and don't see them as corrupt. They're blind to that. And the result of that will be, for the United States, a downturn in the economy, because if you're investing large amounts of capital, ExxonMobil every year invests billions, several tens of billions of dollars in its business, and you don't have reliable government data on purchases, on location trends, on incomes, you will not make optimal decisions, or even reasonably optimal decisions. This will cause damage. It will lower returns. The American stock market has always returned a premium over the European stock market. Well, that's going to go away. That's just not going to continue if the Europeans have solid information and we don't. And one of the interesting side effects of this is many, many businesses are highly dependent on highly accurate weather information. Are we going to start building this project today, or are we going to wait 5 days? When is the next heavy rain coming, or the next super high temperatures that will not allow the particular construction technique we're using? Well, having gotten rid of a whole lot of weather people, having ended a number of our techniques, and discussing destroying needlessly one of 2 satellites that measure transpiration, that is, vapor leaving the ground and plants into the atmosphere. $750 million satellite. I've now noticed that around the country, some television station weather people, the good ones who have a meteorology degree, they're now relying on the European weather forecasters for their data. And all of this is contrary to good business. It's contrary to what he promised voters. And there's no getting better about it. These people who aren't people who make a mistake say, oh, we were wrong there. Donald has admitted to one mistake in his entire life. It was within the last year. And his mistake confirmed something I said as far back as 2011. He would never leave the White House peacefully. And his acknowledgement was, I never should have left the White House, meaning in 2021. Yeah. So Anthony, this is just the beginning of degradation of our economy, our social well-being, our standing in the rest of the world.
Let's talk about where Trump's getting these ideas from, because we know that the Heritage Foundation is behind an awful lot of this. With Project 2025, last week we mentioned Russell Vought, the kind of architect who's running the budget office, and obviously therefore is very much at the is the nucleus of a lot of these changes. But there's also outside influence from the broligarchs, the super rich, the tech bros. And Elon Musk, whilst he might not still be running Doge inside the White House, his kind of people and that influence of people that think that AI can do it better, and you can fire half the federal workers and replace them with an algorithm, that mentality is now baked into a lot of Trump's planning, certainly when it came to the weather. I mean, that was their argument, wasn't it? They thought that AccuWeather could do it more accurately. Well, AccuWeather is connected to a Republican owner, and again is very kind of algorithm heavy, software heavy, and not human heavy. So,
and AccuWeather, Anthony, depends on the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration for its underlying data. Then they massage it, but they don't go out and do the very expensive work of collecting the original data, by and large.
Right, but Trump thinks that AccuWeather could replace whatever it is, and in simplest form, an app can do the work of the people. Right.
Well, hidden in the big, beautiful billionaire bill is a provision that it hasn't been tested yet in court, but as I read it, seems to say to companies, you no longer have to treat workers as employees. You can make them all independent contractors. If you do that, then you're no longer responsible under the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, for providing health care for full-time workers. You're no longer subject to ERISA, which protects people's pensions and retirement pay. You can end contracts at will, especially if you write them that way, because you're a contract worker, not an employee. And well, on the one hand, this would give enormous additional leverage to management. The better run companies are not going to want to do this. It's the companies that don't behave well, that don't treat their workers well, don't treat the communities well, that we need to be worried about. So what we're seeing throughout is an effort to destroy the federal government. Steve Bannon, in the first campaign back in 2016, said that the goal was to deconstruct the administrative state. That's just fancy talk for we're going to burn the government down. And they're doing it now. And I don't think people realize that government is central to your liberty. That's why we have civil courts and a criminal justice system and rules to protect people. Government is crucial to building the commonwealth features, the roads, highways, clean water, air traffic control that enable the creation of private wealth. And they're going to cut way back. They've made it very clear on banking regulation. They want to radically expand the crypto and crypto-like devices, or as I think of those, that's where you take real money to buy fake money. And people won't have any protections if it turns out it's a fraud or somebody diverted money. There'll be no legal protections. I mean, they're creating a real Hobbesian dog-eat-dog world where life will be nasty, brutish, and short. It won't happen overnight. It takes time. The question is whether enough Americans will wake up and realize that the medications that you get are going to be much more expensive. 90% of generic drugs in the U.S. are made in India. Trump just slapped big tariffs on. Now, I'm on a drug that I think every 90 days I pay 87 cents for because it's a generic and it's easy to make. But I'm on another drug that costs $3,400 a month. It costs me $25 because I have insurance through Rochester Institute of Technology, my employer. But drugs like that are going to get much more expensive. And yet Trump promised he was going to lower drugs by the magical number of down 1,500%. So they're going to pay you
so he's
drugs.
He's creating a virtual America, one that exists like made for television.
In his head. That's where it exists.
In his head.
Yeah.
And so we now know that he is lying about jobs numbers. He's lying about inflation. You know, that they're even specifically, I mean, Caroline Levitt kind of took to the podium in the press room and said, you know, eggs are down 20%.
Right.
Very, very, very specific, completely untrue. But they know that in the press room, the assembled press now are on the right, far right, invariably. And so there's not going to be any pushback, and there's certainly not going to go to Caitlin Collins for a question anymore. So things have changed in terms of the authoritarianism of information. Is that his plan? Is just to kind of control the narrative and then, as you say, live in his head?
Yes. I mean, it's to intimidate, to remove people. You know, the removal, the decision to cancel the number one late night talk show, Stephen Colbert, who every night just rips Trump apart. That was clearly aimed at saying, you know, stop making fun of me. And by the way, he's supposed to have his show on the air until May. I'll be surprised if he isn't have his contract bought out before then. He's going full bore as if he's expecting exactly that.
Yeah.
Part of the problem in all of this is the Washington press corps. They're not bad people, but two things do influence their lives. Most of them are access journalists. Their careers and the rewards they get for covering politics, not policy, politics, are access or leaks, or someone gives them a document that allows them to break a story. And you can't do that if you're trying to get these people to use you as their chosen vessel for sending something. Sometimes you get that because they want it in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal and not the opposite. But by and large, you know, you have to, romance these folks to some degree. The second problem is that most Washington reporters are politics reporters. They don't know policy. They don't know they don't know what the Federal Register is. They don't know the law in any deep fashion. I mean, I read literally every day some of the greatest journalism the world has ever produced in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, Bloomberg, and some other places. But you can go over one column and it's just pure garbage. it reads and makes sense, but if you know how systems work and the world works, or you know the law or the math, you know that the reporter is telling you what their sources told you and what the critics of those sources had to say, but the reporter really has no deep understanding of what they're writing about. And Trump is so masterful at exploiting that. And he also knows that once he gets some news source to put something out, then places that wouldn't touch it, like the New York Times, will now touch it because somebody else has reported and it's in the public record.
And there is a copy and paste mentality amongst a lot of lazy journalists, sadly, and
there's far fewer journalists, so that the laziness
there's far fewer, and just the way the internet works. Yeah. I mean, it steals stories and repackages them. But Trump knows that. I mean, I think, and other leaders around the world have also worked out that even if something is untrue, if you say it, information moves so fast that it's already done its trip around the world before you have to redact it, if you ever do.
Well,
and Trump has been using that to his advantage.
Even if you do, there's very good cognitive research that shows that it doesn't matter. I've written a number of times in forums for journalists, stop quoting Trump and then dissecting what he said, because people only remember what he said. What you want to do is what's called a truth sandwich. We're going to quote what Donald Trump said and show you that it's not true or credible or distorted or whatever. Then you quote him, having focused people's minds to read this critically, and then you show what's wrong. It's really hard to get a lot of journalists to do that. Many of them think it's tendentious, and in a newsroom, particularly at the New York Times, the worst thing that can be said about something you've written is it's tendentious. The best thing they'll say is that's smart, by the way. That's the other end of the coin. And a lot of journalists are not comfortable writing on their own authority. That's very unfortunate. But, and the reason they don't want to write on theirs, they really don't know things at a deep level. I decided when I was still a teenager and was a staff writer at one of the biggest newspapers in America, the San Jose Mercury, that no, I was going to, to develop my own knowledge so I could know that what I was saying made sense. That's not the norm. It doesn't mean everybody should be that way. Not arguing for that either.
But it's a problem if the press is that way and the president is that way.
That's exactly right.
He doesn't know anything. How to
meld these together to his benefit. Right. And Donald is not without skill. He didn't become the world's greatest con artist by not being good at what he's doing.
I want to talk about D.C. because we saw him using Los Angeles as a test bed a couple of months ago, where he sent in the feds on horseback in MacArthur Park. I mean, ridiculous to clear an empty park just to make a point. In D.C., he now has lied about crime rates, sent in the feds, the National Guard, and basically federalized the D.C. police. This is unprecedented for several reasons. Firstly, the home rule, I guess, is the first. But secondly, it's unnecessary, and therefore it is again performative and for show. But it is extremely detrimental to citizens of Washington, D.C. and to people's kind of normal way of life to suddenly have the military show up with tanks, as they have.
Well,
This is a test ground, isn't it? I mean, he will do this in other cities, especially sanctuary cities.
Right. Well, on Thursday, Gavin Newsom held a press conference to say we're going to go ahead with our redistricting because Texas didn't back down. And who shows up outside the press conference but a whole bunch of armed federal agents carrying assault rifles? Now, I can think of about a half a dozen federal laws you could make a case they violated. Not that Pam Bondi, Donald Trump's loyal lapdog, is going to do anything about that. But the intention here is to make sure that women and minorities and people on green cards know their place, which is to be in the shadows and act in the servile capacities. You'll notice the first two cities Trump went after, L.A. and D.C., have people of color who are women as mayor. I suspect the next city he's going to reach out to invade is Boston, which has a woman Asian mayor. And he's ticked off the cities he's going to go after, Oakland, California, for example. He didn't mention any of the cities that have higher crime rates than New York, Washington, LA, places in red states run by, white supremacists for forever. And there's statistics out there that various people have been posting showing, there are much higher crime rates in these other places. In the spring, Trump said of Washington, D.C., we've got crime down 25%. Murders are down to almost nothing. Now, of course, he says they're running wild. They're out of control because there's no connection to logic or truth. It's just power mongering. And Donald's belief, and you need to understand this, Donald really believes he's special, that the rest of us are all just nothings and failures and stupid, and he alone is godlike.
The Democrats in Congress and the Senate have brought about a lawsuit basically suing the Trump regime for their overreach in D.C. It seems like the courts really are the only opportunity to get, and hope that you get a judge that is going to be open to this, who is not a Trump-appointed judge or a far-right judge or even Clarence Thomas, to coin a phrase. But I also want to talk about the emotional side of this because, we've gone from a country that is so joyful and so informal and is basically Disneyland, right, to a country where there are tanks in D.C., there are masked agents, federal agents, wearing camouflage, carrying...
And there are rapists and murderers posing as ICE agents wearing masks and camouflage. We know that.
Which might be worse. Yeah. And so the toll that takes on individuals who live in cities like LA and in DC, who have either come to the US for a better life or have grown up in the city and know it as their home, to see it federalized, to see it turn into the equivalent of a war zone, what is that going to do emotionally, not just to the people who live here, but to visitors and people doing business with America? What message does that send to humanity? Well,
fear instilled in the way Trump is trying to do it has very serious long-term health and mental health consequences. And we will get the rotten fruit of this for many years to come, even if we're successful in stopping it and stopping it soon. American tourism to America is down very significantly. I was speaking to someone who is in Las Vegas and has lived there all their life and telling me that tips have fallen, someone whose job involves tips, the tips have fallen by far more than 50%. Right. The hotels are largely empty, so lots of hotel workers have been laid off.
Apparently, border crossings at the Canadian border are down around 35%. So clearly the Canadians don't want to come down here and deal with what Americans are dealing with.
Right. And this is a very big issue in Canada. Lots of Canadians are annoyed about things like a school teacher who was, held for several days. I have a daughter-in-law who lives not just across the border. I'm in Rochester, New York. She's near Toronto. She won't come to visit because she is concerned that she'll be abused and mistreated. And they've been doing body cavity searches, putting people in filthy circumstances, giving them food unfit to eat, and holding them for days. I mean, if you don't want to let somebody in the country, you turn them around and you push them back across the border. That's not what they're doing, because the name of the game here is, we are all powerful, you're a no one, we will squash you, you bug.
There is a detrimental effect to all of these elements, whether it be the militarization of D.C. and Los Angeles and potentially other cities, the interactions at the airports and at border crossings. This is all contributing to a seismic shift in what America feels like and looks like, and that message is now ricocheting around the world, isn't it? From an economic perspective, I mean, has Trump completely missed this? Like, did he not realize that being an authoritarian extremist is going to have a detrimental effect on the economy, and therefore he's not going to achieve his dream anyway?
Donald doesn't have a clue about any of this. I mean, once Donald has an idea in his head, it's impossible to get it out of his head. his economics are basically mercantilism, which is what we had before Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations explained markets. Mercantilism is, you have a piece of gold, I don't have it. Well, it's okay for me to kill you or steal from you because that's the only way you're going to get any more gold, particularly relevant form of wealth given Donald's penchants. And so, no, Donald doesn't see this. He won't believe the numbers that show to the contrary. Now, when my wife and I spent that week at the Chautauqua Institution studying authoritarianism, the one good piece of news was that authoritarian regimes fail. Gandhi famously said, all tyrants fall. It can take a long time, though, with a lot of damage. I mean, think how long Franco ran Spain. But eventually they fail because they can't provide the information, the goods, and the services from government that the rest of the economy needs. And they get greedy and greedier and greedier. And this is a crucial element, the leadership at the top has to, at some point, turn on a number of its closest followers. Why? Because if you don't intimidate those people, execute some of them has been the standard in the past, then you may have a rebellion, you may have a usurper, you may have somebody who tries to get the cabinet to remove you under the 25th Amendment. So you have to selectively take people in your inner circle. And the best way to learn about this, by the way, and be entertained at the same time, is to watch twice, I would argue, so you can study it the second time, the dark comedy, The Death of Stalin.
Right.
When Stalin died, everybody around him understood there was one guy who would kill them all unless they got the upper hand. And it's a hilarious movie, beautifully acted, beautifully written, but it will teach you about authoritarianism and how it has to work, how it's always worked all around the world. And it's not like we don't have this as a well-studied subject. You can have a bookshelf of books on authoritarians and how they operate.
Yeah, that's an Armandi Inucci movie, isn't it? And he's very clever at identifying the insecurities of these people and writing that into the characters. One thing that really has upset Trump's base is the lack of transparency about the Epstein Files, and consequently, Ghislaine Maxwell, and there was a story out about witness tampering there. We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to get your views on how that might change the status quo between Trump's superfans and this kind of, this brick wall behind which lies this information. We'll do that next on The Weekend Show. When you start a podcast, it seems like you have to figure it out all by yourself. Scripts, setup, filming schedule, logos. It can be super overwhelming, and every day seems to introduce a new decision that needs an answer. When you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can start to begin to overrun your life. So finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. And for millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the e-commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. You can get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. Accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/weekend. Go to shopify.com/weekend. Shopify.com/weekend. We're back on the weekend show with David Cay Johnston. I'm Anthony Davis. Ghislaine Maxwell's controversial prison transfer following her interview with a Justice Department official raises substantial concern the administration may be trying to tamper with a witness, some House Judiciary Democrats have argued in a recent letter. I mean, that's just the tip of the iceberg, David, really, isn't it? That, Ghislaine Maxwell is completely untrustworthy herself, arguably one of the most serious sex traffickers in American history, and Trump is kind of using her as an expert witness, I presume, to get her to say, "Oh, Trump had nothing to do with any of this." That's not going to wash with his fans. The conspiracy behind this is that something is being hidden. What's your take on this changing storyline?
Well, some of Trump's fans will believe anything. That doesn't matter. But I firmly believe that Donald's greatest vulnerability is the Epstein case. Donald can survive Stormy Daniels and cheating on his taxes and not paying workers and all sorts of other stuff. I don't believe he can survive clear evidence that he is a child rapist, and not a one-off child rapist, but someone who was doing this often, frequently. And, we have 24 young women out of the roughly 1,000 young women who were trafficked who have given depositions or interviews or talked with their own lawyers at great length. So there are places where there's information. It's just not the full story. We know from the raids on the 5 different Epstein properties that they got a lot of video, a lot of still images. Now, if Epstein was not in the financial investment business, and there's absolutely no evidence that he had any significant chops as an investor, but was in the extortion business, all he would need to do is find out, you have a taste for, 12-year-old Asian boys, and you're a multi-billionaire. He's got evidence of that, and now he demands that you give him money. How much would you pay? I mean, just think about this for a minute, in the audience. Just imagine you have billions of dollars, and your whole legacy is gone. All your money's gone. You're going to spend the rest of your life in a prison, literally, and a tough prison, because if you're a sexual predator in the federal system, you don't go where Ghislaine Maxwell is right now, to a Club Fed sort of place. You go to a horrible, horrible prison. How much of your fortune would you give the guy who is extorting you to keep it secret? And so one of the things I keep saying is, let's get the trading records, the reports that Epstein sent his clients. He had one very large client we know of, and others apparently were much smaller, showing the distributions or the withdrawals they made over time, because I don't think we're going to find anything. It's going to be like we had with Madoff, Bernie Madoff, and his scam. So Trump's followers, by and large, were absolutely primed by him that we have to see all the Epstein files and they'd be made public. And so long as the Republicans have Pam Bondi as Attorney General, and by the way, a complaint's been filed against her for behaving unethically in Florida, it could cost her a law license. Here's the subhead to that. You don't have to be an attorney to be the Attorney General of the United States. You don't have to be an attorney to be a justice of the Supreme Court. You don't have to be a member of Congress to be the Speaker of the House. You
don't have to be human to be the president, by the looks of it.
Very good. There's if I can just finish that.
Yeah.
So there's no chance that the Bondi folks who control this material are going to release it as things stand now.
Right.
What we have to hope for is that they're not dumb enough to destroy the evidence, so that if the Democrats get control of the House, and especially if they get control of the House and the Senate in January of 2027, then they can start demanding and pushing for these things in a way that they can seriously enforce them. I also think there's some openings for state-level prosecutors in this. None of the crimes committed under Epstein can be prosecuted anymore, as best I know the law. And I'm not a lawyer, I'm just a law professor. But I can't find any crime that they can prosecute. But keeping those records and eventually making them public, as many of the women who were trafficked when they were 13, 14 years old want to have happen and have clearly said so either directly or through their lawyer, that should be the number one focus by those people who want Trump out. Keep that story alive. Keep finding new angles for that story. Keep coming up with this or that disclosure so it doesn't go away, because that's what Trump is hoping. We'll just get tired of it.
Yes, well, that's clearly the case. I mean, there's been so much water under the bridge since this all kicked off because of various distractions, including arguably sending the military into Washington, D.C. I mean, these
or going
things,
to Alaska.
Or going to Alaska, right. These things are directly in place to act as a smokescreen for the Epstein Files. But Todd Blanche, who's the deputy AG, I mean, he was Trump's right-hand man throughout all of Trump's trials. He was his personal lawyer.
Right.
He's the guy who's gone to meet with Ghislaine Maxwell. She's now in this kind of very low security prison where she has total freedom other than being able to walk out the front door, as far as I understand it. I mean, what message does that send? Because no one really seems to be covering that story properly.
Yeah. There are a whole bunch of very heavyweight criminals who Trump has pardoned or given clemency to. And the latest report I've seen is that Ghislaine Maxwell is now on day release. That is, she can leave the prison and then has to come back basically and sleep there. Under Bureau of Prisons rules, she should not be in that prison. She would be regarded under Bureau of Prisons rules as a threat to the other women who are in that prison because she's a violent predator. But the message all over, the message in meeting with the guy who paid $55 million for one of Trump's crypto devices, and the taking $1 million contribution for a Trump-affiliated organization from a woman whose son was then granted pardon. And all the other ones, the head of Silk Road, the biggest facilitator of money laundering and drug trafficking in the history of the world. If you commit crimes Donald approves of, then you get off. And if he doesn't like you, throw a tuna fish sandwich at a federal agent and you will be charged with a felony, which literally just happened. So this has nothing to do with any concept of justice. It is about, I have the power and I'll do anything I want because you don't matter. I do.
Jamie Raskin, on behalf of the Democrats, he's a ranking member of the Judiciary Committee, is demanding answers on her transfer as well as all documents and information related to Blanche's interview. I mean, what are the chances of us kind of even hearing that interview in full? I mean, it's very reminiscent of the CCTV of Jeffrey Epstein's death mysteriously changing in duration.
So long as the Republicans control the House and the Senate, I think it's highly unlikely. It's possible because there are a number of MAGA Republicans who are demanding the release of these files.
Yeah.
And if they don't back off, Trump will see to it that candidates are run against them so that they toe the line. Assuming the evidence is kept in place, then it's going to be a big issue. In the case of this improper transfer of Ghislaine Maxwell to this low security prison, my guess is it was all done with phone calls, so there are no records.
Right.
One of the things Donald Trump knows very well is he does not traffic in email. And I remember a number of years ago, a U.S. attorney, totally nonpartisan guy, worked under Republican and Democratic presidents, very good prosecutor, saying to me when we have lunch one day, well, you know, the guys we catch, the mistake they make. And I go, I'm talking about Wall Street type folks. And I said, no. He said, well, the ones who use email. And I said, why? He said, because sooner or later you forget that the email is like a postcard. It's not confidential. And you write something you shouldn't write. And I came back immediately and said, I know that there's a very prominent, highly regarded American banking executive who is a serious criminal. And he goes, how do you know that? And I said, there's a file I read, the first page of which said from a court, if you're even aware of the existence of this file, you're violating the orders of this court, basically, and will be subject to sanctions. And, you know, it just laid out how he perpetrated serious felonies by working through his assistant who had her assistant who had her assistant. So that if he were ever charged, he could always say, oh, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, they misunderstood.
Yes.
They didn't get the signal right. And the guy went, yeah, that's exactly. You want to get away with crimes. You don't do the email yourself. you have plausible deniability, a phrase from the Nixon era.
I want to talk about this meeting in Alaska between Trump and Putin. But before that, what gets Trump there, as I understand it, is his desire to win himself a Nobel Peace Prize, because Obama won one and now he wants one. He even went as far as to cold call Norway's finance minister last month to ask about this nomination for the prize and threatened tariffs if he wasn't nominated.
Right.
Just before we talk about Ukraine, let's just talk to that, because you've known Donald Trump for 30-odd years. I mean, if this is true, this really is the measure of the man, isn't it?
Anthony, this fits with a pattern that I describe in my 2016 biography of Trump, The Making of Donald Trump. Donald Trump literally has given awards to himself, and they hang in his golf courses. Yes. This is in addition to, where he claims he wins every golf tournament he plays in, which is nonsense. But he literally was on the board of a basically fake organization that supposedly gave out not just the most prestigious award in the hospitality business, hotels and restaurants, but the most prestigious award in the world is what they said about it. It was run by a two-bit mobster, famous for not wearing socks. And Donald gave these awards to himself, the 5 Diamond Award, and he bragged about how he had earned these awards. So this is not surprising that Trump thinks he can extort a Nobel Peace Prize for himself, right. Which, by the way, the Nobel Prizes are given in Sweden. The Peace Prize is given by bankers, and it's controlled out of Oslo. I don't mean to diminish it. I mean, really great people have won that award who are brilliant economists, the economics award anyway. But the Peace Prize itself, I said that all wrong. I apologize. I got off on the wrong track. There's no way Donald qualifies for the Peace Prize, even with his bogus, absurd claim that in the first 6 months in office, he stopped 6 wars.
I was surprised to read, though, that Hillary Clinton a couple of days ago said that if Trump was successful at bringing about a ceasefire in Ukraine that didn't require the handing over of territory to the Russians, then she would nominate him for a peace prize. And initially I was like, oh, what is she doing? And then I thought, actually, this is really rather clever, because Trump probably puts the peace prize ahead of any instincts for the details of the plan. He just wants the prize. Do you think Clinton might be right in actually playing him in this little game?
Well, I think that's sort of a game of chicken here. and let's keep in mind, Donald Trump dropped $500 million worth of bombs on Yemen.
Yes.
It had no effect on the Houthi rebels. They killed a couple of the leaders. The Houthi rebels are still doing what they're doing. And what it did do was kill a lot of children, women, disabled people.
Yeah, killed nearly 300 civilians, I think.
Yeah, significant numbers of people. So, I mean, I cannot imagine Donald Trump getting the Nobel Peace Prize, even if he brings about a resolution in Ukraine so that there's no more killing and the Ukrainians get all their territory back. Getting exactly what Zelenskyy wants. I can't imagine that. If it does, people are going to refuse the prize in the future because it's tainted.
Yes.
Nobody wants a tainted prize except Donald, to whom nothing is tainted. You gave it to me. I don't know if you saw the footage of when a sports team came to the White House and the head of the Sports Federation was trying to move Donald out of the picture.
That's right.
Because it was for the athletes to be photographed and
he got nudged to the back. Yeah, it wouldn't go. And then he stole the trophy as well. So right. I mean, this is he's photoshopped himself onto the cover of Time magazine to hang in his office and stuff like that. So this is a deep narcissism, deep insecurity, but also it shows a total lack of self-awareness, doesn't it? And that can be exploited by people like Putin.
Yeah, Donald is an empty vessel, Anthony. Inside, he desperately needs to fill his insides with adoration, with imagined money. Now he's actually at money because he's extorted a couple $2 billion from around the world.
Yeah.
But Donald has never known pleasure or joy or contentment. The few times he's tried to tell a joke, it's like watching a hostage video. occasionally someone will write to me, and say, well, you just hate Donald Trump because he has a beautiful family and a beautiful wife. And I go, no, I don't hate Donald Trump. I feel sorry for the man.
Yeah.
He will die never having the joy I've had as the father of 8 children and a husband, and in being recognized by others, though I didn't even plan to recognize my work. Donald, it's not there, and I feel sorry for him. If you or I had grown up with him as our with Fred Trump as our father, we might well be like Donald, because it's the only way we could survive.
So let's talk to Ukraine for a moment. As we're recording this, Trump has just kind of arrived in Alaska with Vladimir Putin too. Talk about the importance. Well, it's not even the importance. I'd say it's more the compromise or even the sacrilege of meeting on American soil. Putin is wanted by the international courts. He is a war criminal. And to give him credence by meeting him on American soil, I mean, maybe Trump doesn't know that Alaska is in America and thinks it's Russia. Is that what happened here?
Well, no, but from the Russian perspective, this is sacrilege for sure.
Yeah.
Because if you'd grown up in Russia, you would have been told that the czar who sold Alaska to the Americans for $7.2 million made a terrible mistake, and that should really be Russia. So what's the message by meeting in Alaska? Because they could have been anywhere on U.S. soil. Putin can't go most places. He'll be arrested, just like Pinochet was in Spain. They could have met in California or Hawaii, for example. They could have met at an American military base somewhere else. It's a message that, borders can be changed. We just need to have a financial transaction. And what has Donald been saying? Well, if you want my support, Zelenskyy, you're going to give us half the mineral rights in your country. Not knowing, by the way, that the Soviet-era maps of where the supposed wealthy minerals are probably aren't reliable because they're Soviet-era, right. Stalin-era maps. Produce what Stalin wants or go to the gulag if you don't get shot first. But Donald has no sense of the history about this or anything else. He doesn't understand at all what a huge diplomatic benefit this is to Putin by even giving him a meeting. Donald doesn't understand you don't meet with someone who is misbehaving. He went and met with Kim Il-jung. He walked across the DMZ line to meet with him, and then he said he loved him. It's a man who had his uncle killed, a man who had another general killed because he nodded off for a minute during a meeting of the top leadership. And this all goes to Donald's ignorance. And Donald kept saying before leaving to reporters, I don't have a plan. I don't know what we're going to do. We'll just have to see. But it's really the next meeting that matters, not this meeting. That's not how you negotiate. No. You don't even have to be in the very sophisticated world of diplomatic negotiations to know that that's not how you negotiate.
But he was creating an out for himself because I think that he knew that he was out of his depth deep inside, and so he was creating a safety net.
I agree with you about that. He was giving himself a way out, and if you listen very carefully to Donald, he's always doing that. He is always providing something that will allow him to blame the other person or walk away and, I did my best. But he set the standard. It was Donald Trump on the campaign trail who said, on day one, I will end this war. At one time, he even said he didn't need to be inaugurated. He just needed to win the election.
Right.
And he doesn't have magical powers. World leaders, as he claims, are not calling him up and saying, oh, thank you, Mr. Trump, for telling us how awful we are. And we're here. We're so happy to be able to bend the knee to you and give you whatever you want. It's just made up stuff. But, the poorly educated that he loves to brag about, who include a number of members of his cabinet, they don't know that.
The delegation was supposed to just be Trump and Putin and a translator. We now know that this is extended, and there is now Steve Witkoff is present, and Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, is present, and the equivalent delegates on Russia's side. And they're seated behind a kind of blue printed backdrop that says "Pursuing Peace" multiple times. I mean, that's not really what this is about for anybody. I mean, we were told that Putin is coming with potential business offers and is going to blackmail Trump that way through financial incentives. I mean, that's what's really going on here, isn't it?
Yes, Putin understands that if he can say to Donald, we're going to invest so many $1 billion in the U.S., never mind that the Russians are so flat broke they've been reduced to bartering to get wheat in a country that grows a lot of wheat because they can't grow enough right now. He's going to try and turn this into a commercial transaction because that's what Donald understands is commercial transactions. And I'm very, very pleased to hear the news that just broke that Trump is not going to be alone. Because when Trump meets alone with Putin, we have no idea what went on. We have no idea what secrets he'll give away. And let's remember that in May of 2017, just weeks into his presidency, he met with Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, and Kislyak, the Russian ambassador, who was a trained spy master. They didn't announce it. After the meeting was revealed by the Russians with their smiling pictures, two things happened that are very important. One is Russian state television aired footage of a meeting, typical office. The doors burst open. A bunch of guys come running into this room that has men in suits sitting all around a long table, throw a bag over a guy's head. He disappears. And pretty soon, articles start appearing from reporters who cover intelligence saying this guy was a U.S. agent, was feeding the U.S. government information. And Trump must have given him up. And I can see Donald saying, yeah, I know what's going on in the White House. My friend so-and-so is telling us everything. That's how indiscreet Donald is and how important it is for him to brag. Secondly, and very revealing, the intelligence entities in Australia, Canada, the UK, which are part of the Five Eyes program that also includes New Zealand, in the Netherlands, and a couple of other countries, began leaking to the reporters who cover that in their countries that they were pulling back on sharing with the U.S. because Trump had given away sources and methods. We have absolute evidence that Trump showed documents to people who have no security clearances that he had stolen, and he revealed how close American attack submarines and ballistic submarines, sometimes called boomers, can get to a Russian submarine before they can hear us. U.S. taxpayers have spent decades and a fortune developing the way screws or propellers for submarines are created so they are silent. They don't create bubbles. They don't make noise. I mean, really expensive, super, super secret process no one else in the world has. And he gave this away. So Trump meets alone for 6 or 7 hours with Putin. My God, what is he going to tell Putin? So having Witkoff, who is the real Secretary of State, I think, at this point, Rubio, who Donald has always diminished as little Marco and who he's basically now moved out of the box for Rubio's presidential ambitions, is better than the alternative. They also may, before the meetings are over at Elmendorf, Joint Base Elmendorf in Alaska, there may well be one-on-one meetings where nobody else is in the room.
I tell you who's not in the room, and that is Volodymyr Zelenskyy. And that really is a serious omission. What right does Donald Trump have to say, okay, I'm going to go and negotiate on behalf of this sovereign nation that I know nothing of, have no real interest in? I mean, it's just, to me, that's where this Nobel Prize comes in time and time again. It's like he will insert himself into any negotiation to take the credit for it so that he can get that nomination.
Right. And Donald doesn't care about the approval of Zelenskyy. He cares about the approval of Putin.
Yeah.
He looks up to people like the dictators in North Korea and China and Russia and Saudi Arabia because they are all powerful and they're not accountable. Zelenskyy, while his term has been extended because of the war, was elected. Furthermore, he's a comedian, and Donald hates comedians because they find him such rich fodder. I'd point out that there's not a single successful comedian on the world stage who isn't incredibly smart. That's why they see the jokes the rest of us miss. This is an unmatched pair here, Putin and Trump. But Donald doesn't think everything he does is inherently right because I'm Donald and I'm right and you are just an idiot.
Zelenskyy is kind of stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea. He needs, obviously, the offensive weapons to be able to take on Russia. Europe is united in supporting the sovereignty of Ukraine. Trump has changed the narrative on who started this war, and this is Biden's war, it's not my war, and, they should never have started it. I mean, this use of language, speaking like a child, fighting over toys, it's truly terrible, but his mental illness allows him in his own mind to rewrite history, despite all of the historical documents, video and audio recordings. I mean, that requires quite a stretch, doesn't it, to think that you can change who the aggressor is through your language. He thinks that he can brainwash people, but maybe he's right.
The magical thinking of Donald. He creates his own reality. Something I first said about him, I think, back in 1988, when I also wrote that he might become president someday.
Right.
I would fault the Europeans here and Biden for the way they dealt with what they knew in the fall of 2021. Biden, you may recall, released raw intelligence information, something almost never happens, to show that we knew the Russians were building up troops. And we knew that because they don't have encrypted communications, and they allowed soldiers to have their handheld cell phones and call home to mama or their girlfriends. The Dutch and the Germans and everybody else, the Norwegians, could listen in on what they're doing. And I think Biden, who after years on the Foreign Relations Committee thinks like a diplomat, instead of little incremental steps, should have said in the fall of 21, you put one foot inside Russia, you will be stopped. We will, starting today, this would have been October, if I recall, 21, I'm sorry. We are going to provide them with the best weapons, unlimited amounts of ammunition, the best training. Our soldiers aren't going to be anywhere near the battlefield, but you are going to really regret that you did this, and had told the Ukrainians, once they attack you, the gloves are off. Instead of saying, well, you cannot fire missiles 5 miles into the Russian territory. No. And Putin's ability to do whatever he wants here is demonstrated by one overwhelming fact. From February of 24 to February of 25, the third year of the war, 400,000 Russian soldiers were killed to gain 0.5% of the territory of Ukraine. Now, I've been looking, and I cannot find a butcher's bill on a per square kilometer or per square acre basis as high as that anywhere in past battles. Of large-scale battles. By any account, it's a horrible, horrible butcher's bill. 400,000 people from a country that has about 70 million men in it. Wow.
Yeah.
But nothing's happened to Putin because he is the dictator and absolute ruler. And that's what Donald wants to be. And a guy like Zelenskyy, democratically elected. He should be out of office. And besides, he's a comedian. No respect for him. Now, hopefully, the NATO countries, knowing the threat they're facing, and the Estonian leaders in particular have been in the forefront of saying the Russian tanks are coming if you don't stop this guy, they will say, yeah, we got to step up and do more here. We got to provide more weapons and more training and more intelligence. We got to help them build these drones that they're using very effectively. And by the way, 500 years from now, Anthony, if you were a military officer and you get sent to a war college, because they're going to promote you from, lieutenant all the way up to general if you pan out, you will spend probably several courses just studying the tactics and strategy of the Ukrainian army in the invasion by Russia, because they've really changed the game, and they're absolutely brilliant in what they've done. And I know some people hear me say that and they think I'm pro-war. I want us to get beyond war. There's actually an organization called that. I hope someday human beings will reach the stage of evolution where we don't have wars. But, I'm also a realist that there are a lot of bad people in the world, and Vladimir Putin is right at the top of that list. He'll take your land. He sent troops into Georgia. If you believe many of his critics, and I emphasize I don't have solid and unquestionable proof about it, the way he came to power was that those bombings in Moscow that were blamed on Chechen rebels were actually committed by Putin's agents so that he could claim they were Chechen rebels and use it to seize power. There's certainly a lot of evidence of that, but it falls in the same category as Donald Trump as a serial child rapist. Lots of smoke billowing out, no hard, irrefutable evidence.
Putin has not really changed his demands for the last
Not
couple
one
of
bit.
years.
Not one bit.
And so that skill of his, I mean, he is a former KGB agent himself, right? So he's like remaining the strong, silent type, and is requiring Trump to do these merry dances all around and coming out with these, this changing narrative. And Trump this week is, saying, I expect to see a ceasefire the very day of the meeting. I mean, ridiculous things to say. Putin must be loving this, though. I mean, he really is walking right into Putin's arms. And this is also what the broligarchs want as well, right? This kind of, these tech bros, they also want to see the world order changed. Right. And that is, for me, the most worrying part of this, because it's not just about Ukraine. It's about where Europe and America find themselves as former allies. Trump hates all the European leaders, right? He has nothing in common. He
doesn't respect them. He looks down on them.
Right. And so what's just finally, what is the world going to look like towards the end of Trump's term once he has pivoted America from being a friend to a foe?
Anthony, one of the most troubling developments begins with Mitt Romney 2 years ago saying millions of members of my party, the Republican Party, don't believe in democracy. There's now a number of surveys, polling data from different organizations showing large numbers of under 30 Americans don't think democracy is a good idea, which tells me we've been doing a horrible job of teaching civics and social studies, something I've complained about in articles for years. Peter Thiel, the billionaire who put Vance forward to be vice president, and a lot of people think in a way that hoping that eventually they could remove Donald and put him in there. He just said the other day, I no longer think that democracy and freedom are compatible, or something to that effect. I don't have his words exactly.
Yeah, well, he also advocates for humans being killed off. I mean, he doesn't care for the human race either.
Right. And so you have a whole lot of people who have no respect for the sanctity of human life, some of whom, claim to be, by the way, absolutists on abortion, but a number of these people. And so they don't care about little people. They don't care about ordinary people. They care about themselves. They care about their money. And they're able to get support from a lot of people, not just in America, but around the world, because we've been going through an era, which I started documenting in 1995 in the New York Times, in which more and more of the fruits of economic progress are being channeled to the top. After I wrote my best-selling series of books explaining this, the RAND Corporation, the think tank that the Air Force and Boeing set up in 1948, and it's an actual think tank, did a huge project. And they concluded that in a period of roughly 45 years, starting in the mid-1970s, $50 trillion was transferred to the top 10%, and almost all of that went to the top 10th of 1%, the top 1 in 1,000 households. And that had that money been distributed the same way it had been for the 25 years before that, the bottom 90% of Americans would have had 62% more income in 2018. Well, all of the stress you see in America, people who feel hopeless, people driving beater cars, marriages falling apart because of the economic stress that couples have, that would pretty much have gone away if it weren't for this. And it's very hard for people to understand these mechanisms that I uncovered in, unbelievable hours reading the most unbelievable, difficult to read statutes and regulations. But there are all these subtle mechanisms that every day take money out of your pocket and my pocket and everybody watching this, that they live in America, and transfer them to people at the top. And if you could just get a penny a day from everybody in America, at the end of the year, you'd have about $1.2 billion. Well, there are hundreds of these devices that I described in my book, particularly my book, Free Lunch. that came out in 2007, beginning of 2008. So I'm not surprised that many people say, what the hell has democracy done for me? What good is democracy to me? Because first and foremost, we lead economic lives. And if we're fortunate, we have romantic lives. We have lives with functional families and a loving spouse if we want to be married, and if not, that we're able to work it out to be left alone. That we have friends. That we live a rounded human existence. And a lot of people can't do that. They work 2.5 jobs. They're just exhausted all the time. They get irritated at their kids because they're a drain on them. Why? Because we're not paying the proper kinds of wages. And it's not that we can't. In Denmark, people who work at McDonald's get paid vacations and health care and retirement plans, and they make a living wage. In America, I proved a few years ago, McDonald's fry cook today is worse off than a servant in a wealthy person's house in Manhattan in the Gilded Age in the 1890s. They're worse off. And so we need to, what if we get through this, if the West is able to get past this and Donald Trump is removed and we get somebody decent in the White House again, that is not the end of this. That is the beginning. We need to establish new rules in our Constitution, large provisions of which the courts have basically said nobody has the right to enforce. We need to fix our education system designed in the 19th century to create factory workers and drones in offices, to have the kind of critical thinking skills you were taught in England that children learn in Finland and Norway and Germany and Singapore. We need to be stop these mechanisms that allow big companies like General Electric to build or refurbish factories with tax dollars that are taken from the schools and the police and the libraries. Companies should not be allowed, as they are in 20 states, politically connected companies, to keep the state income taxes withheld from their workers' paychecks, which they don't know about. It's hidden from them. It's a story I broke, 12 years ago when I was at Reuters. We need a whole lot of things we need to do to fix what's gone wrong in American society, and we need to get the one thing that no other modern country does. We need to have, what we do is crazy. We need to have universal no out-of-pocket health care, something Donald Trump told me in 1988 he thought was what we should have. There are lots of fixes to do. Donald Trump did not arise out of a healthy society that was functioning for the benefit of the great majority of people. He rose out of a society in which, because of the campaign contribution system and the influence of corporate funds and wealthy people's money, has led to all of these rules that subtly pick the pockets of everybody not in the top 1%, and half of those people, half the people in the top 1%, they're just two-income workers. A doctor, a surgeon married to a successful lawyer. That's half of the 1%. It's the 10th of 1%, the 1 in 1,000 and up, the people in the $3 million and up income category. They're the ones who are getting all the fruits of the benefits. We have people in America now with multi-billion-dollar annual incomes, not multi-billion-dollar wealth, multi-billion-dollar annual incomes. Larry Ellison of Oracle, the database company that started out, best we can tell, as a CIA project using stolen Russian software. He gets more than $5 billion a year just in dividends from the company. Now, he spreads them among his family and trusts, but that's the beneficial ownership he has of the shares. He pays almost nothing in taxes on that. So
we're seeing the same with government employees now. We're seeing the same with government employees. You mentioned Peter Thiel. I mean, he's invested in Palantir, which has these government contracts where, surveillance now connected to you, where they're joining up your social security information with your health information, your employment history, your medical records, and bringing all this stuff together, even your social media.
Right.
These people are making huge sums of money off of the surveillance of regular Americans. But so much of it is done by stealth. I mean, I even noticed at Trump's military parade, Palantir had hoarding up as a kind of advertising on the parade route. I mean, it's not even like they're trying to hide it. And I think that is my fear. You know, I watch movies like Blade Runner, and I think, you know, this is this dystopian future that was predicted in science fiction is very much a reality. But as long as the sun shines and the palm trees sway, it's very hard to convince some people that that stuff is actually happening.
And if you're really smart about that, like the government in Singapore, which is not accountable to the people. Singapore is an absolute police state. They have drawings of your apartment with exactly where the wires and the pipes are. An incredible amount of knowledge by that government. But if you are looking at it superficially, there are no potholes in the wide, well-paved roads.
Yeah.
Everywhere there are flower gardens where government employees are maintaining these beautiful flower gardens. It's a paradise. I mean, as I've said about Singapore in the past, if you're going to live in a police state, Singapore would be the ideal, because unless you get crosswise with the government, they don't care. And if you do, nobody's going to see the knife. They will very effectively knife you. So I think we need to recognize that if you want to be a free people, then you have to stick with certain principles: accountability, limited power, responsibility, prosecuting people who misuse their positions in office. We need to recognize the genius of the Native American peoples we call the Iroquois, who lived from Toledo, Ohio to Nantucket Island, the area that I'm in, where only women voted. The big movement among people around Trump: women should vote, we should repeal the 19th Amendment. Only women voted, only men held office, and the women, if you were an abusive official, they could remove you like that. You didn't behave, they'd replace you with another man. And we need to think about things like that, about the benefits of a parliamentary system where no confidence vote leads to a new election, to a presidential system, which historically had been seen as more stable, but I think that's severely in question. And you're not going to remain free if people go, I don't care about politics. Oh, hey, the football game's on. If you think the president of the United States should be telling people what to name their football team, what history you should be able to see in a government museum, that women should be staying home and popping out babies, and you will not remain a free people if you don't have some critical thinking skills about that. And at the core of this, underneath it all, there has to be an economic plan that the fruits of the American economy and other democracies, but America being the biggest problem area, followed by the UK in this, aren't subtly drained off by those at the top with political power and influence. They are widely distributed according to people's contributions. And you can do all that in a capitalist system. You just have to have rules that don't allow things like you can get rich off of taxes, you can get unlimited interest-free loans from the government that last decades, which are all things I've exposed. I'm no longer certain we will get out of this and maintain our democracy. I think we're at a risk we could lose it, but we still can win, and we ought to fight like hell to make sure we do win, because the great idea of the American Revolution and the Constitution, our second American Republic, because the first one failed for no power to tax, the Articles of Confederation. The great genius was, what would happen if instead of someone telling us what to do, a king, a tyrant, we decided our destiny ourselves? And so far we've done pretty well. And we have a right, if you follow that theory, to throw our democracy away and become vassals of Donald Trump and people like him and live under a dictator. I think we're smarter than that, but people have to act. They have to be resolved, and they have to be diligent, and they got to get out the vote in November 26.
David Cay Johnston, thank you for joining The Weekend Show.
Thank you, Anthony.
I'm Anthony Davis. Don't forget to support me and independent journalism at patreon.com/5 Minute News or by joining the 5 Minute News YouTube channel. And I'll come back next Sunday with a brand new special guest and more factual news to discuss on the 5 Minute News Weekend Show with Midas Touch.